Hi folks, welcome to The Real Germany and a video on the subject which is probably the hot topic of the moment. How to become a German citizen. Hot topic for all the Brits living in Germany at the moment post-Brexit referendum. If you find yourself enjoying the video, please like and subscribe. If I make any mistakes or you just like to share your experiences, let me know how the process of gaining German citizenship has been for you. Write a comment below and we'll get stuck into it. Obviously, since Brexit, our future as currently EU citizens living in another EU country is very uncertain. Now, this video is going to be about my personal process, how I became a German citizen. I'm pleased to report that I completed the process in 2017, so 2 years ago now. Almost a year after the Brexit vote, or a little longer than a year after the Brexit vote. I must say this is not a definitive guide about naturalisation, about gaining German citizenship. I am not an authority. This is just going to be my personal story, a few anecdotes along the way. If you need authoritative information, please, there is only one place to go. Visit your local authority, your local authority for foreign citizens in your city or town, what will be called the Ausländeramt or Ausländerbehörde. Don't just listen to me. This is going to be more my own personal journey. What I will do, I will address the basic requirements, take you through those main points one by one, and also talk about the documentation I need to submit with my application in order to gain citizenship. And what I will do though is address one point particularly later on that seems to be the source of a lot of confusion. I've been talking to fellow Brits online who have not yet gained German citizenship but are maybe planning to do so that they can have a more certain future. They're planning to live here, continue living here in Germany, and like everybody, nobody knows what's going to happen with Brexit. We don't really know for certain. Is the UK going to leave the EU after all? It was Article 50 was triggered almost immediately. The first exit date passed, the second exit date passed. There's a third extension in play now. Currently, we are 5 weeks away from the next deadline. We have no deal. We don't know if we're going to leave with a deal, without a deal. It's all very much up in the air, and this is obviously a source of a lot of worry for people living here, living and working here. It's a lot of upheaval. And I have heard a lot of misinformation on one particular point regarding residency period, how long you have to be a resident here. But more on that later. I'll come to it later. I just think it's important to address it. I will take you first of all through the basic requirements one by one, and through the documentation as I just said. So let's get straight to it. Number one requirement for anyone applying for German citizenship is you have to have been a resident in Germany for at least 8 years. I believe there are some exceptions, but this is the general rule, and I also know that there is an opportunity to reduce that requirement to 6.5 years by attending integration courses. I don't exactly know what they entail. There will be a language element, I presume, a cultural element, but a lot of it will be getting your German up to speed and integrating into society. My case was a little bit more complicated because I was originally a resident here for 10 years, from 1999 to 2009. I left the country, came back. I was away for 5 years. I came back in 2014, and because of that I had to wait a couple of years. But that's exactly the source of confusion that I was talking about, and I know for a fact that fellow Brits have been receiving misinformation even directly from the authorities themselves, and it's important maybe to know the rules, to know the laws, but I'll get back to that later. Point number 2, you must have a permanent right of residence in Germany, and that will be documented by your unbefristete Aufenthaltserlaubnis. Me personally, as an EU citizen, because Britain has not left the EU yet, it was a very simple matter. I already had my residence permit, my permanent residence permit. It's an automatic procedure as an EU citizen, and seeing as Britain had not, the UK had not yet left the EU, I still had the same status as every other EU citizen in Germany. So that was an easy one. Point 3. You must not be a risk to the basic free democratic order of the Federal Republic of Germany. And indeed, there is a declaration a written declaration in the application form that you will observe the German basic law, Grundgesetz, and uphold the principles of democracy as defined in the Grundgesetz. And you indeed have to swear an oath. When you finally receive your certificate, you have to swear an oath. I memorized it. I no longer know how it goes, but for my appointment, when I went and picked up my naturalization certificate, I memorized it. I'll show it here. Point 4. You have to be able to provide for yourself without unemployment benefit or any similar kind of social security payments. Obviously that has to be documented. I'll come to that in the documents section. I am a freelance translator, so I obviously had to provide tax returns, etc., to prove that I'm in full employment. Number 5, and this one's an interesting one. You are required to relinquish your previous nationality. In most cases, in order to gain German citizenship, you have to give up your old citizenship. But there are exceptions, and this is one reason why I struck immediately while the iron was hot. As you've probably guessed, the exceptions are EU citizens and Swiss citizens. There are other exceptions which deal with people who come from a difficult political background. They're put at risk or in danger by relinquishing their old nationality, and there are also some nation states which refuse to accept that. So the German state does not insist that these people write a written declaration relinquishing their old or their current nationality. But in my case, the big exception that made the difference was obviously that I was, and still am obviously, an EU citizen. EU citizens are entitled to take German citizenship and keep their old citizenship. So as of November 2017, I am not only a British citizen, I am a dual citizen. I have dual citizenship, and I'm German. I am German and British, and that will not change in future, even after Brexit. And I thought that was a no-brainer. At that time, the Brexit vote was fresh through. I went straight down to the Ausländerbehörde. I had a few questions. I asked about certain issues I wasn't clear on. The part about how long I had to have been a resident here, the part why I moved away and came back again, a few general questions, and it turned out that I could process my application around a year later, in autumn of 2017. And I didn't want to risk anything, knowing that I had special status as an EU citizen and I was entitled to dual citizenship. It was an easy choice. There was absolutely no debate whatsoever. I mean, I was personally prepared to relinquish my British citizenship. When I first went down there, that's what I was expecting, or rather, I'd started doing the reading online. I'd never really bothered before. It was Brexit, the Brexit vote, the referendum that made me make this move, take this step. I just wanted to make sure my future was secure, and my future I knew was going to be in Germany. So I would have been prepared to take on German citizenship. Some people say I've turned into a German culturally anyway. You decide. Comment down below if you think I'm more German than I am British now. But it was an easy choice. I'm now a dual citizen, and I have nothing to lose. Being a German citizen also gives me the added right of voting in national elections, which I didn't have as just an EU citizen. You have the right to vote in European elections locally. You can vote for the German candidate for the European Parliament, and you can also vote in local municipal elections. You can vote for the local mayor and stuff like that. Point 6. You must not have a criminal record. I didn't know how I was going to prove that, but it was an easy point. When you submit your declaration, the authority, the Ausländer run the checks themselves, and if you're clear on the database, it comes back, this person is fine, and they can process your application. That was an easy one. 7. You must have sufficient German language skills. I was more than confident on this. Obviously, I've lived here a total of 15 years now. At that time, it was 13 years. My German is fine. I work as a translator. I hardly use English in my everyday life. I speak German almost exclusively at home. But obviously that's something that has to be documented, your ability to speak and write German. I was advised when I went down, by way of documentation, because I had the benefit of having studied German in Britain, and I had a certificate that I'd studied a degree which involved German language. So I was advised to submit that, but I was also told that the civil servants working at the Ausländer, they have the right and the opportunity to interview you and document your German ability themselves, which I thought was very fair. I imagine it's different from region to region, from town to town. I'd love to hear your experiences if you're watching and you've gone through the similar process and you've had a different experience. I know other people have had different experiences to me. Mine was a very positive, happy experience, especially in that point. The civil servants I had to deal with here in Dortmund were great. That was fine. And the final point 8, everybody has to do this. You have to take the citizenship test. It's free to everybody that is planning to or has already submitted, as not free of charge. There is a small fee. I don't exactly know how much it was, but it wasn't a great deal. It's open to everybody who is planning to submit or has already submitted an application for German citizenship, but it's also compulsory. It's multiple choice. I believe there are 33 questions that you have to answer within 1 hour. For somebody who genuinely is integrated into German society, it is very, very, very straightforward. There are a few questions that you may not automatically know. They're all about general cultural issues, social issues, the history of Germany, political structures, for example. I remember the first question in my test was, what event marked the 8th of May 1945? And there were 4 possibilities. One was the death of Adolf Hitler, which I suppose you may think it is, but it was the end of the Second World War. Then there are more specific questions about your region. I think I had to answer, what are the colours on the flag in North Rhine-Westphalia? if you've ever been out on the street and seen it, you know what colour the flag is of your Bundesland. It's not a difficult one. And I think the requirement is only you have to answer 16 or 17 correctly. I'm a smarty pants. I took 4 minutes to complete it and got 33 questions right out of 33. Of course, they were, to be quite sincere, they weren't all questions that I would have automatically known the answers to, but you can do a trial test online beforehand. Go to the local authority internet site and you can search for Einbürgerungstest and you can do a trial, and you can choose to go through all the possible questions or a lower certain number of the questions and just try them out, and you can do it as many times as you want. So you run through a lot of questions, and I was very lucky. I did it a couple of times, or a couple I didn't know straight away, and my second guess was right and they came up in my test, so I knew the answer. It's very, very fair. There are also, I think, a total of only 300 possible questions that can come up. So you sit down for a couple of hours, you can go through all of them, and you'll be familiar with most of them. It's not the most difficult exam. Regarding the citizenship test and the language requirements, obviously these 2 points are requirements. They are bureaucratical requirements. But I would say if the process is going to work for you, they should be personal requirements. I imagine it would be a lot more difficult if you have come to the country and you've kind of lived in a parallel society. You only really have contact with, in my case it would be other Brits. I hardly have any contact to British people here in Germany. I never have. It's a lot to do with the fact that when I first came out here, it was on a year out from university. I came to study. I came with really one goal: to learn German as best as I could within 1 year. And I actively looked for contact with people, native speakers of German, residents here, or at least people who spoke fluent German, people who live and work here, study here, whatever. And back then, of course, we didn't have internet, we didn't have Netflix, and TV was German TV. I learned a lot of German by watching terrible soap operas like Marienhof and Nur die Liebe zählt. Maybe not the best quality TV, but they helped me learn German. And I had little choice but to integrate. It's easier now. I think I now spend a lot of time watching films, television programs in English because that's the original language that they are made in. I also spend a lot of time on the internet communicating with other people that speak English. Back then, the world wasn't so interlinked online and you were properly submerged in the country. But I imagine it's a lot more difficult if you haven't really naturally taken that step. If you're not speaking German on a regular basis, you're not dealing with local authorities on your own, you're going to be confronted with what people call Amtsdeutsch. Literally, it's the German language that authorities use, official, convoluted German. I mean, like any official language in laws and in official guidelines for whatever. It's difficult, it's convoluted, it's not everyday stuff. You're going to be confronted with sentences like Hat der Ausländer sich aus einem seiner Natur nach, nicht vorübergehenden Grund länger als 6 Monate im Ausland aufgehalten, kann die frühere Aufenthaltszeit im Inland bis zu 5 Jahren auf die für die Einbürgerung erforderliche Aufenthaltsdauer angerechnet werden. And in this one specific case, it was very important that I understood this really long, complicated and convoluted sentence, because I know other people who have been told a different story and it applied to my case and it applies to others, and others are being sent away and told that they cannot become German citizens yet. More on that later. Okay then, we're going to look at the documentation that you have to submit along with your application. Obviously, number 1 is the application form. Number 2, I also had to submit a CV, general CV in German obviously. 3, you're required to submit a passport photo. Number 4, you need to photocopy all the pages of your passport or the identification document you're using, depending on what you've got. You have to submit your birth certificate. In my case, it was obviously a British birth certificate. Here I actually have my original birth certificate from 1973 from Barnsley. I didn't use this one, I had to get another one, and obviously this is in English. This, by the way, is just some of the documentation, some of the notes that I was using to process the application. So it's a lot of convoluted Amtsdeutsch and a lot of fun. Obviously the birth certificate was in English and I had to get that translated. Now I work as a translator, but my translation obviously wasn't acceptable. I'm not a sworn translator. I had to get a certified translation with a stamp from a certified or sworn translator. But that was a simple enough process. Apply for a copy of the birth certificate online from the local authority in Barnsley. Point 6, I had to provide a copy of my marriage certificate. That was very simple in my case because I got married to my wife here in Dortmund. That was just a case of going next door and to another department and getting another copy. 7, obviously proof of earnings. To prove that you can provide for yourself, I had to provide proof of earnings from all the family. So my wife in this case, who was working full time at the time anyway, so wage slips, and I, being a freelancer, I had to submit my tax returns for the last, I think it was 3 years. That was relatively straightforward. And 8, the last point was you had to submit some documentation, some certification of your language ability. Obviously, if you attend an accredited language school, they can give you a certificate for the level that you've reached. I think it's B1 that is accepted. I had a lot of luck in my case, as I said, they advised me to submit my university degree. It's a Bachelor of the Arts, and also very lucky that in the meantime they've kind of standardized higher education's qualifications, and a BA now is recognized in Germany, and I imagine they could have insisted on me having that translated, but they didn't. I think it probably swayed matters that I was very confident and very fluent in German. And as I say, the civil servants said that they also have the option of certifying language skills themselves. And that was it, basically. In my case, it was very, very quick. It helped because I went down at the end of the summer in 2016, so almost immediately after the Brexit referendum, and asked what I needed to do to process my application. And in the end, I had to wait a further year. I'm going to come back to that point. And in that year, I just took the time to gather all the documentation. I went and took the Einbürgerungstest, the test for citizenship, excuse me, the citizenship test, so that when it came to hand in my application, I knew that everything was complete, with maybe the exception of my language certificate. Maybe I'd be asked to provide something else, but that wouldn't have been a big problem. Now, back to the big point then, and that rather waffly German sentence that I just read out. I had lived in Germany from 1999 to 2009, so obviously during that period of uninterrupted residency in Germany, I was already entitled to German citizenship. But I left, and I left for more than 6 months, so I no longer qualified. I came back in 2014 in August. 2 years later was the Brexit vote. A couple of months later, I went down to the Ausländer and asked, how does that work? Do the 10 years from earlier count, or do I have to wait another 6 years? What can I do? And I had a lot of luck. I was very lucky. It turns out the civil servant I spoke to was very competent, and he told me exactly that, what this sentence means. And it says that if you leave for more than 6 months and come back, your earlier period as a resident of Germany, a maximum of 5 years of that can be counted to your total residence. So it was a case of 5 years from the original 10-year period, plus the 2 after returning, 2014 to 2016, and he said, process your application in 1 more year and you'll have your 8 years full. And I was talking, as I say, I was talking to people in a Facebook group, and I was kind of disappointed and upset to hear there were so many cases of people in a similar situation. They reacted exactly the same way that I did to the Brexit referendum. They live here, they work here, they want to stay here. They'd gone straight down and asked the same question. They'd been in a resident of Germany for varying periods, gone away and come back, and so many had been told, no, you have to start from scratch. The earlier period doesn't count at all. Please, I'm going to add a link in the information below this video, an official link to this law that states that a maximum of 5 years from an earlier period counts. And I hope it helps, and I'm going to write out the text, the specific text that I read out that addresses that point. If anybody tells you any different, hold that in front of their face, and good luck. A quick anecdote of a more light-hearted nature then. The day I finally went to pick up my certificate of German citizenship, by sheer coincidence, it turned out to be the same day that the English and German national football teams played a friendly match together. I'd seen this coming, and I couldn't resist having a bit of a joke with it. I have an uncle who I love dearly, but politically we differ, our opinions differ, let's say, and he indeed had voted leave in the Brexit referendum. And this was something I've been planning all along, just to pull his leg a little bit. Obviously noticed that that was the day of the England-Germany game. And I went online and bought myself this shirt. And the day of the game, the day I picked up my certificate, I also took this photo with this shirt and my certificate, with an explanation obviously there that it's the certificate of naturalisation as a German citizen. And I sent my uncle an email saying, now look what you've made me do, and then asking him the question, how do you think your lot will get on in the game tonight? Now, whether or not I genuinely do support the German national team over the English national team is a different matter, but I amuse myself with the joke. Stay tuned for some bloopers and outtakes as ever. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. I'll be back with more content for you. If you want to leave any comments, I'd love to read them. Maybe you've gone through the same process, maybe you're going through something. If the video was interesting, if it helps you, if you hated it, write a comment. I'll be happy to read whatever you have to say. As I say, I'll be back with more. Until then, take care. As I say, the birth certificate. That wasn't the only requirement. Obviously, this is just some of the